back to another episode of M Makes. I'm Em, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit about a set of projects that I did toward the end of last year. They kind of extended into this year because I ran into several issues along the way and modified the pattern in a lot of ways, to the point that by the time I was done, the third project, it's pretty much a completely different pattern. So yeah, I'll be talking about that. They are the pictures that you just saw at the beginning. I made 2 tractor sweaters for a friend who has 2 little boys. She's a farmer, and so it was very fun to make little tractor sweaters for her. And then also I made a little crane sweater for my cousin's baby. My cousin's wife works as an engineer, and she works with a lot of cranes and just really loves them. So I actually designed the crane motif on the front of the sweater. So I'll be talking a little bit about that too. And yeah, guess we can get right into it. So this tractor sweater is the one that I knit most closely to how the instructions said to knit it. I knit it the front, bottom up, and then at the top I cast off for the front, kept knitting the shoulders, first one and then the other, knit the back shoulders, cast on for the back of the neck, and then knit down the rest of the body. And then so once both sides of the body were knit, you seam the sides and then do the sleeves and the collar. So that was according to instructions. The thing that I did not do according to instructions was the tractor. The instructions say to knit it using a Fair Isle technique. I found that that left some rather large floats on the back of the fabric, and so instead I added the tractor using duplicate stitch, which kept my, it kept the sort of potential places. This one's a little bit big, but it kept the potential places for small fingers to get into the back of the embroidery to a minimum. The things that I didn't do quite correctly on this sweater are that I did not cast off the sleeves using an Italian bind-off method, which probably would have been ideal. I just did, I don't really know what the sort of normal regular cast-off method is called, but they still are fine. They look a little bit different than the way they maybe should, but I don't really mind. I like this little braided look, and the important thing is that his hands can go through them. I did learn to do the Italian bind-off for the collar. Well, I knew how to do the Italian bind-off, but I didn't know how to go from 2x2 to 1x1 ribbing in order to make it. So I had to learn that for this collar. Initially, I didn't. Initially, I cast it off using this same stitch, and it ended up being, well, initially I cast it off using the same stitch, and then I wanted it to look like this. I wanted to fold the collar down and have it be a sort of, I don't know, I guess a folded over collar is what you call it. But when I had done that, not using the Italian bind off, it ended up being way too tight to fit over his head. And now I've done it with the Italian bind off. Ideally, I would still like it to be like this because I like that look better, but I'm afraid to do it because I'm going to mail it to him. And if it doesn't work, then I don't want him to not be able to wear it. So at this point, I'm just gonna call it and leave it as is, and it's a little sort of mock turtleneck. So that is what is closest to the pattern. The pattern also called for it to be a mock turtleneck, by the way. It didn't call for it to be folded over. This looks pretty similar with the exception of the striping on the sleeves and the differently colored collar and cuffs, but the construction is very different. Instead of knitting up the front, casting off, knitting the shoulders, casting on, and then knitting down the back, I knit the whole thing in the round, and then I cast off a couple of stitches on either side for the arms. Then I knit the front back and forth, casting off here for the collar, kept knitting each shoulder back and forth. And then, I had held the back stitches live, then I knit the back and forth, knit the back shoulders, and then I actually used a Kitchener stitch. So you can maybe see that it looks a little bit different than the rest of the piece, which is just to say that my Kitchener stitch is not that amazing. This side I think looks a little bit better.
a little bit less noticeable. But the reason I did this is just because, you know, obviously knitting in the round is just faster. I was under a time crunch. I like knitting in the round better than I like knitting back and forth. So yeah, the construction of this was actually totally different. There are, of course, then no side seams. And then I did the striping, and I did the same thing, putting the tractor on using duplicate stitch instead of the Fair Isle technique. And yeah, so that's sort of how this one changed. This is one that I have started. This has, instead of a tractor, it has a crane on the front. I came up with the design for the crane and I like it, but I actually started this before I did the tractor sweaters, and I did it using the Fair Isle technique, and it has left very large floats on the back, which I don't like at all. Additionally, I did this using the technique that the pattern for the tractor sweater called for, where I knit up the front, knit the shoulders, and then knit down the back and seamed the sides. Again, I don't love this. I don't love the way it looks. So and additionally, if that weren't all enough, I'm not 100% sure that this is going to be big enough for the child that I'm making it for. So I am actually going to take all of this out, despite this being 2/3 of the way finished sweater. I mean, the body is, well, it's at least half, the arms, yeah, it's at least 2/3 of the way finished, right? I've got a 2/3 of the way finished sweater here, and I plan on taking it all out because I don't love the construction and I don't love the use of the Fair Isle here, and gosh, it just might not fit him anyway, and that would suck. So here goes nothing.
Back to the drawing board. So here I wasn't really thinking, and I didn't remember to take a lot of footage or pictures of this as I was starting to knit it, but you can see that in this stage I've already knit most of the body of the sweater, and I've cast off a couple of stitches for the underarms, and I've actually split the front and back stitches here already and have the front stitches live, and then the back stitches you can see here are on hold. And then once I get finished knitting the front and the front shoulders, I'll put those shoulder stitches on hold and pick up the back stitches and knit up the back. And here all of the shoulders are done and the stitches are live but on hold. Now it's time to take them out of their holders and put them back onto a set of needles and use Kitchener stitch to stitch each of the shoulder seams together so that it's pretty invisible when it's done. My Kitchener stitch, it leaves a little bit to be desired, so it still looks a little bit noticeable, but overall it kind of looks like it's mostly just a knit piece of fabric without a seam in it, so that's the goal. And then I had to do the same to the other side, and on this side I think I ran out of yarn or something, and so you can see here I'm using like a crochet hook to try desperately to make the last very small piece of yarn work for the last couple of stitches. It is never fun when you get to that point, but thankfully there are crochet hooks to save us from ourselves. Next, I picked up stitches all the way around the armholes to create sort of the armhole border. And the armholes I then just knit with a 2x2 ribbing similar to the bottom of the sweater, and did the same thing for the neckline. Once the collar and neckline were complete, it was time to mark out the place where I was going to be using the duplicate stitch to add the motif. Now, this was pretty simple. I basically just knew that I had 74 stitches across, so I just needed to put 22 stitches on either side of a central 30 stitches. So my motif was 30 stitches wide. That means I have 44 stitches left, so 22 stitches on either side. So I just had to kind of count, find that center. And then I followed the pattern for the tractor sweaters and chose to start the motif 32 rows up from the bottom. So once I had those all marked out, I could start doing the duplicate stitch, as you can see here. Once the motif was done, it was time to block the sweater, so I cleaned my sink and then added some lukewarm water and a little bit of the wool wash that I use. It's not really a detergent, it's more of like a kind of wool shampoo. And then I had to take off these little clips that I had forgotten to remove. And then it was time for submerging it. It's really important to just kind of gently make everything wet and to not actually like rub the fibers too much, like squeeze, yes, totally rub, no. Then pulling it out, you can see I don't wring the fabric at all, I just squeeze. Squeeze, don't wring wool, always. After that, I pulled out my blocking mats and then got to work kind of unrolling it. You roll it up in a towel and kind of step on it to make it really dry because you can't really wring it out completely. And that way you can squeeze without wringing. And then yeah, you just kind of lay it flat to dry, kind of make sure it has the shape you want it to have. And voila.
So that's about it. That was the journey of the 3 children's sweaters / sweater vest for the crane version of it. They were really fun to knit. I learned so much about sweater construction and about sizing. So many things. The sizing was really challenging just because I had to mail all of them. I didn't have the kids with me. It's so much easier to knit for someone when you can have them try it on multiple times during the knitting process. Just like the sweater that I'm currently knitting, I'm working on this sweater for my husband. I've had him try it on many times so that I can get the fit just right. That is much harder when you're knitting for someone who is not present. So yeah, those were some great lessons and it was a really enjoyable process, and I look forward to reusing this pattern again in the future. Next time I have another kid to knit a sweater with a motif on it. Thank you all for watching this far. If you've made it this far, amazing. Thank you so much for being interested. If you enjoy this kind of content, like and subscribe so that you find out whenever I have another project to talk about. That's when there'll be another episode. So, thanks.